Hi, I'm Shamali Chatterjee, and I'm an assistant professor in agricultural and biological engineering at Purdue University. I will tell you a little bit about what my lab did this year in 2020 and what we will continue to do in 2021, right? And I think this would be a nice thing for a starting lab where we will talk about our accomplishments in a given year and then our aspirations for the coming year, right? So I have a wonderful group of students, collaborators. I'm very thankful to all the support and collaboration, and also all the funding that we got. So we got new funding from Army Research Laboratory, and we also got funding from National Science Foundation, Computer Science Directorate, and this was in the CPS area, that is Cyber Physical Systems area. And the overall area is IoT and edge computing, right? So my lab, ICAN, which is the Innovatory for Cells and Neural Machines, has two thrusts. You have the IoT and edge computing thrust and the computational genomics thrust. And the fact that connects the two, or the thread that connects the two, is applied machine learning. So we have both data science and data engineering, because data science and engineering kind of come hand in hand, right? So you have data science, and then you also have distributed computation needed to run these machine learning algorithms at scale. The other thing that we are really interested in is energy-aware computing, right? So as computation becomes ubiquitous, even in the form of federated learning, where I think of federated learning more like distributed learning, but more versatile. So if you consider, say, a room full of people with cell phones in their hands, right? So can you use the compute power of these cell phones, right? And these cell phones may be of diverse computational capabilities. Someone might have the latest iPhone, somebody else might have a really old iPhone, and somebody else might have an Android phone, right? So these come in different forms and factors, and so you have to leverage the compute that comes in these different forms and factors. So my lab is also very interested in federated learning, because you're taming the computational capabilities on these cell phones, and you're not wasting compute cycles, right? So we wrote a paper early on in briefings in bioinformatics where we thought of how you can instantiate federated computing for computational genomics, right? And that paper appeared a few years ago in Briefings in Bioinformatics. It was a collaboration with Volker Meyer at Argonne National Laboratory, with Purdue Computer Science, Purdue Electrical and Computer Engineering, and ABE, where we came up with what are the 3 steps that you have to have in order to be able to federate a production scale infrastructure, which is MGRAST. And in recent years, what we have done is actually, as of 2020, I was almost going to say last year, we are looking at how to leverage federated computing for some of these IoT and edge computing workloads, and specifically in the area or in the application area of digital agriculture. So we have been doing quite a bit of work thanks to funding from Wabash Heartland Innovation Network, which is from the Lilly Endowment. And what we have done is now we have these sensors that have been deployed in different forms in this adjoining area, Purdue area, where we have forms that have allowed us to install these sensors, and these sensors, they measure things like moisture, soil, nitrate, etc. So this is kind of leveraging the ability to set up this, physical test bed where you have these sensors that are being deployed in different forms. At the same time, what we have done is we also have these pretty powerful NVIDIA devices that we have used to build a test bed in our lab. And in the lab, what we have is we have various NVIDIA devices, such as we have Jetsons and Xaviers and Jetson Nanos, and also the Raspberry Pis. And using this, we are setting up this test bed, which has the ability to mimic, say, if you have a fleet of self-driving cars, and these self-driving cars may have different embedded devices that are working underneath the hood of these cars, right? So if you have this kind of a distributed computational framework, can you see how to leverage this distributed computational framework in order to run algorithms at scale? So one very specific kind of algorithm, or one very specific application that we are looking at, is computational vision workloads, because these have become ubiquitous, and you want to do analytics oftentimes at the edge instead of taking the workloads to the cloud. This is because you don't want to hog the bandwidth going back and forth from the cloud. And oftentimes, if you consider latency sensitive workloads, you are incurring additional costs by going back and forth, right? So we don't want to do that. So if you think of the under the hood, the algorithms that are doing this kind of video analytics these days, it's almost exclusively neural networks, deep neural networks for image processing or object detection. So if you want to be energy aware, and if you want to do these on the device or at the edge, that is edge devices, which are typically lower resource than the servers you might have in the cloud, you want to use lightweight DNN. So you want to have different ways to approximate the computation. So we have ApproxNet, which does object classification using approximate analytics, video analytics, and then we have ApproxDet, which appeared in Census 2020, ACM Census 2020, and we have object detection, which is being done in an approximate manner. So what we do is we come up with what is the kind of object detection workload, and depending on how fast moving the objects are, so we have slow moving objects, we have intermediate moving objects, and fast moving objects, and depending on the context, we can do approximate analytics, right? So if you have a fast moving object, you might have to do faster tracking and detection, whereas if you have a slow moving object, you do slower tracking and detection, right? So this is ApproxDet, and in ApproxDet we also have something else. So we have context aware and we have contention aware, right? So if you think of a smartphone, right? So if you're doing federated learning, where you're using the computational devices in a room, so different people have different smartphones, and you may not exclusively do object detection on these computational devices, right? So for example, while you're doing object detection, I may ask Siri, hey, what is the weather looking like, right? So you might have multiple applications that are occurring on these devices because, these devices are used for multifarious purposes that might generate contention. So how does your application handle this kind of contention? So ApproxDet handles both context and contention. So when I say context, it means, an example is whether you have fast moving objects or slow moving objects. Depending on that, we have different levels of approximation. And then contention aware, where you have different applications that may contend with each other. So you have fixed computational resources and you have different applications that are contending with each other, right? And this is kind of easier to do in server class computers where you have proper isolation between resources, whereas in these newer classes of devices, depending on how sophisticated the device is, there might not be proper resource isolation, right? So there are various challenges as you bring to the fore or you crowdsource different kinds of devices to do these sophisticated analytics. So video analytics is something that we are looking at both at the edge and if you're doing in-sensor analytics, so you might have very inexpensive and low compute resourced devices. So like I said, these sensors or these edge devices, they may be computationally weak, they may be battery powered, so you need energy awareness there, right? So an example of computer vision workloads, you might have object classification and object detection, and we are also doing activity recognition now. So how can you do approximate object classification, detection, and then activity recognition? And these are an increasing level of sophistication for computer vision, right? And if you look at the ways to process them, as you go along these increasing levels of sophistication, you need smarter and more complex neural networks in order to make sense of these different kinds of workloads. So this is, basics of what a deep neural network looks like. And with that, I will continue a short spiel on how we have been continuing with our applied machine learning for computational genomics as well.